She then asks Chris if he's willing to do a polygraph. And Chris is like, yes, of course. She says, before we start, we first need to establish an emotional baseline for your responses. Basically, she's going to ask him a bunch of questions and he's supposed to deliberately lie when he responds. They go through the exercise and then she says, wow, I have to say, you're actually a really bad liar. This tells me that you actually know that it's wrong to lie, so thank you for being a terrible liar. She then says, the coolest thing is that only one of us knows the truth, but in about 2 minutes, there's going to be 2 of us.
Wow, that's an interesting way of phrasing it.
Welcome to the Compendium, an assembly of fascinating things, a weekly variety podcast that gives you just enough information to stand your ground at any social gathering.
We explore stories from the darker corners of true crime, the hidden gems of history, and the jaw-dropping deeds of extraordinary people.
I'm Kyle Risi, your ringmaster for this episode.
And I'm Adam Cox, your figure skater for this week.
Oh, you got your little leotard on this week.
Yeah, I don't know if a circus does have an ice rink, but...
I think it can. You can have the Circus Soleil on ice.
That's me.
Actually, speaking of the figure skating dancers, I really want to do an episode on Tonya Harding.
Ah, that would be a good one.
Who played her in the movie? Was it...
Margot Robbie.
Oh, she is beautiful.
I can't even remember what that was about.
Oh, okay, I'm definitely doing it then.
I did see that Margot Robbie was getting hated on because she's pregnant. And people were like, oh, she's let herself go.
Oh, no, gender dynamics at play. People are horrible to women, aren't they? God's sake, God forbid she has a baby and has a family.
Yeah, she looked good. She was a pregnant woman in a swimsuit. And
oh, hang on. You mean she was pregnant during Tonya Harding, the recording of that?
Oh, no. Just recently, I think she's expecting another child.
Nice. Who's she married to?
A man.
A man. Just a man. He's not important.
Yeah.
Before we dive in, a quick heads up for all you lovely freaks out there. Remember that signing up to our Patreon gives you early access to next week's episode, an entire 7 days before anyone else. And it's completely free of charge. And if you want even more, you can become a certified freak for a small monthly subscription that unlocks all of our unreleased episodes up to 6 weeks earlier. It is the best way to support the Compendium and keeps us growing.
And while you're at it, don't forget to follow us on your favorite podcast app and leave us a review. Your support really does help us reach more people who, like you, love a good tale of the unexpected.
And actually, we've had loads of new reviews this week. It'd be really a pleasant surprise to read. You guys are so lovely to us.
Yes.
Why? If you meet us, you won't be saying that.
There's a couple where they were listening. I think they ended up laughing in public. So that was really nice. They felt silly for laughing in public, but I think they enjoyed the episode.
They said you should really put a warning on this episode because it's not a good look to be laughing out loud on the metro. What was that episode for? Was it it was the 96th Academy Award Oscars, the worst Oscars in history.
Yeah, I think that was a funny one.
The comments are just amazing. But all right, freaks, enough of the housekeeping. Let's buckle up and get today's show started. Because, Adam, today we're diving into an assembly of tragedy a family should never have to endure.
Oh, no, not another tragedy story.
What other tragedies have we done?
There's been a few, Kyle.
Oh, God, like what? Am I milking the tragedy?
Yeah, they're mainly coming from you. I like to keep them upbeat, lighthearted, and you...
Well, when I do the Tonya Harding episode, that will be a bit lighthearted. Actually, no, doesn't she break someone's legs?
Yeah, maybe.
That'll be another tragedy. Anyway, Adam, today's story is actually about a family that made the headlines back in 2018. It grabbed the attention not just because of how awful it was, but also due to the sheer amount of exposure that the Watts family at the center of the story had online. The mum of the household was a woman called Shanann Watts. She was pretty much an MLM marketer for a wellness company selling various Thrive products in her hometown of Frederick in Colorado. And being online was a huge part of her success as a sales rep. It gave her visibility, credibility. It made her feel relatable and trustworthy to the people that were interested in her Thrive products. The image that she presented was that of a devoted mother to her daughter Cece, who was 3, her other daughter Bella, who was 4, and a loving wife to Chris, her handsome kind of Chad-like husband. And to the world, they seemed to be like the perfect family. They were happy, successful, living the American dream. Their business was thriving. Their products were a constant feature in the story that they told to the world. The lives we present online often don't match reality behind closed doors. The truth was that in spite of their perceived success and this idyllic happiness, the Watts family was drowning in debt, living far beyond their means. And on top of this, their marriage was falling apart. On Friday, August the 10th, Shanann left home for a work convention in Arizona with her friend and co-worker, Nicole Atkinson. During their trip, she confided in Nicole about her ongoing marital struggles with Chris, something that she had done like many, many times before. Nicole, of course, she listened as usual, she comforted her, and she reassured her that everything would be okay. But despite her independence and determination as a young businesswoman selling Thrive products, Shanann said to Nicole that she just could not imagine a life without Chris or the family that they had built and was terrified of the idea of a separation. Eventually, their trip came to an end, and so later than expected, at 1:45 a.m., Nicole pulled up outside Shannon's house. They said their goodbyes, they promised to talk again in the morning, and Nicole watched as Shanann grabbed her suitcase from the boot and made her way up to the front door. A few hours later, Nicole expected to hear from her as planned, but nothing. No texts, no calls. As the morning turned into the afternoon and still no word, Nicole called Shannon's husband, Chris. He was already at work and had told her that earlier that morning he asked Shanann for a divorce. And after a long conversation, she told him she was taking the kids to stay with a friend. But something felt off to Nicole. She was standing outside of the house and things didn't seem right from her vantage point. And so she urged Chris to come home. What followed would be a desperate search, not just for Shanann, but also for their two young children, leading to a devastating outcome. So today, Adam, I'm going to be telling you the heartbreaking story of the Watts family. Have you heard of the story before?
I don't think I have, although there's a few things you said there that may have triggered something in my memory. I don't know if I'm just getting confused with another story. So I really don't know what's at play here, but is it the husband? I don't know. The way you introduced him makes me a little bit suspicious.
Yeah. So the thing is, for many listeners, this is a story that they already know really well. But of course, in classic Compendium fashion, you, dear Adam, are none the wiser.
I've been living under a rock.
You've been living under a rock. Where have you been? And honestly, this is going to be tough, not just because Shanann has gone missing, but because at the heart of the story, there are two very young children. So consider this kind of your heads up to our listeners. If this is a story you'd rather not hear, I completely understand. I promise I will not be offended. But fair warning, this is a deeply troubling episode. And the story kind of sort of exploded like in 2018. And since then, there have been countless documentaries about it. Probably the most well-known documentary is called The Family Next Door. And since its release, it's been like the most watched Netflix documentary on their platform. And what I think pulled so many people into this case wasn't the tragedy itself. Of course, that was like a massive part of it. But it was also the sheer amount of footage available online, because the Watts family documented a lot of their lives, right? So intently that internet sleuths had an overwhelming amount of material to dissect along the awful details of this case. But beyond that, the case also unfolded in an era where like surveillance cameras, like Ring doorbells and CCTV were just everywhere. It was also like standard practice for police officers to wear body cameras. So when the investigation began, so much of this was actually caught on film. And honestly, this isn't a story that drew out over weeks and months. Because of the recorded evidence in this case, police were actually able to solve this case in less than 72 hours.
Pretty quick. That's really quick.
Either quick or what happened was just so glaringly obvious.
Oh, yeah, fair enough.
So there is a lot to be said for living in a world, really, where pretty much our everyday lives are captured on camera.
Yeah, I can't remember what they say on how many times you're captured on CCTV, but it is a lot, isn't it, in terms of you're walking around?
What, like in a day?
Yeah.
Shit, yeah. You got to think, like, how often do we get people on our neighborhood group saying, oh, I've had like some jobs around my house. Has anyone got a Ring doorbell that they can provide some footage on? That's just commonplace now. Just everyone seems to have them. And it helps as well. People post footage of people getting up to mischief outside their houses all the time. Crazy. Anyway, Adam, normally I'd say I was excited about today's episode, but it's probably not appropriate to say that considering how grim this episode is going to be. So instead, should we just get into it?
Yeah, that's a warning, but I think I'm ready for this.
So Adam, When Nicole dropped Shanann off home at 1:45 a.m. on August the 13th, footage from their video doorbell confirmed that Shanann made it safely inside through the front door. Nicole saw as much. But the next morning, when she called several times and got no answer, she didn't immediately panic. It never kind of crossed her mind that Shanann didn't make it inside. But ignoring calls, that just wasn't like Shanann. And Nicole knew that she had a really important doctor's appointment that morning. One Nicole had even offered to drive her too, so the silence just didn't make sense in this context. So around noon, now really concerned, Nicole decides to drive over to the house and she notices that Shanann's car is still in the garage. She can hear their dog barking in the house, but there was no movement from Shanann, Chris, or the girls. When Nicole peeks through the entry window, she can see Shanann's shoes on the floor by the door.
That suggests she's still at home.
She's still at home. Ordinarily, to anyone else, this would be like no big deal. She's just wearing different shoes that day. But Nicole says these were the shoes that Shanann always wore. So she tries the door. It's locked. In fact, it's locked from the inside, which means that if someone tried to leave the house, they would have to have left through a different exit. It crosses Nicole's mind that maybe Shanann had some kind of medical emergency going on. Maybe she'd fallen down the stairs. Shanann was also diabetic, which could mean that she might have passed out. She just doesn't know for sure, but something definitely feels off. Would you get that same kind of instinct that something might be up?
I guess if Shanann and her typical ways that she goes about life, it would seem, and this was really unusual, then maybe. But for me, at the moment, it doesn't seem that off.
Oh, interesting. Okay, fine. So Nicole decides that she's going to call Shanann's husband, Chris, who left for work around 5 a.m. that morning. He agrees to come home, but he's over an hour away. If Shanann is having a medical emergency, then waiting that long might be too late. So Nicole decides to call the police. She's kind of like stuck in this uneasy space. Like she doesn't want to do nothing, but also she doesn't want to overreact and look crazy. So like she is kind of like, what should I do? But this is quite urgent. My spidey senses is kind of tingling, etc. So I do feel for her. But since Chris is so far away, the police end up arriving first. They're reluctant to force way into the house without his permission. There is like a digital pin lock on the garage door. Nicole knows this code, but it's not working, which means the only way in is through the electronic fob on Chris's keys. While they wait, Nicole tells the police that Shanann had been kind of upset all weekend while they were away. And before the trip, she and Chris had been arguing. She doesn't seriously think that this has got anything to do with it, but she's just trying to get all the information out there just in case it's kind of useful.
Sure.
Chris finally arrives and immediately he gets out the car, he walks straight over to the officers, he shakes their hand and then he clicks the fob of the garage door. First thing he does is he goes and checks Shannon's car. He opens the back seat, he takes a quick look and then he moves into the internal garage door to unlock the front door to let everyone in. It takes him 1 minute, 17 seconds to do this, which is a long time for such a short distance. So we don't actually know why he took this long.
And the police, no one was like following what he's done. He's just walked into the house, which I guess seems normal. And how has Chris behaved at this point? Is he like concerned or he's like, oh, I saw her or this morning or last night, everything was fine?
He seems just regular, like he doesn't know what's up yet. Mm-hmm. Obviously, all he knows is that she's not in the house.
Okay.
And of course, he's acted pretty promptly, right? He's opened up the garage door, he's gone through and he's gone around to let the cops in. When he opens the front door, the police ask if they can look around. Chris is like, sure. He signs some papers, which permits them to search. And he's like, just search wherever, I don't care. Inside the house, they find the dog. He's fine. He's just like wondering what the fuck's going on. There's no sign of Shanann or the girls, Bella or Cece. It doesn't seem like there's been a break-in or anything. Nothing seems to be missing. And as they walk through the house, they're just chatting casually to Chris. They're trying to piece together what's going on. And while this is happening, Chris is on his phone. He's scrolling through, probably texting people to see if they know where Shanann is. The officer asks where he thinks she might be. And he's like, I thought maybe she went to a friend's house or something, but her car's in the garage and all her stuff is here, so I don't really know. Then on the kitchen counter, they spot Shanann's purse. Inside is a wallet, her credit cards, her keys, everything. Even if someone had picked her up from the house, she wouldn't have left without those things. Do you know what I mean? They do spot a suitcase at the bottom of the stairs, so the police are kind of like wondering, like, why? And it's not clear if this is a suitcase she had when she got home from the night before.
Or if she was packing or preparing to pack.
Exactly. I think the assumption is that she got home really late. She's not exactly going to unpack. Mm-hmm. And that was what the suitcase was. It was definitely the suitcase that they saw her coming home with in the Ring doorbell. Then Chris finds Shanann's cell phone between the sofa cushions and it's off. And by the way, this isn't some kind of like intense police search, right? It's not like, this is the police, hands up. It's nothing like that. They're just casually walking around. They're talking to Chris. They're trying to work out just what's happened. Nicole, though, she's definitely worried. You can kind of see her kind of struggling to stay calm. And we know all of this because the police are wearing these body cam kind of footage cameras. They're capturing literally everything. I'll leave some kind of links in the show notes, which I definitely recommend you watch. You might get a few little insights and clues about what might be going on here. So while they're upstairs, Chris goes into their bedroom. When he comes out, he's holding Shanann's wedding ring, and he says he found it on the nightstand, which kind of reading between the lines is like a symbol that Shanann has left him. So the officers ask if they notice that anything else is missing from the house. He has a little look, and he's like, yeah, our bed sheet on our bed seems to be missing, and so does the kids' blankies from their bed, but everything else seems to be here.
The bed sheet, that's a really weird thing to take.
It is, isn't it? Very strange.
Especially if it was the one that was on the bed. If you needed something, you take a clean one from the closet, right?
Yeah, but why would you take that and not your purse and your shoes?
Yeah.
Chris gets Shanann's phone. He turns it on, which is strange in itself. It's not like the battery is dead. It's just off. Like, who turns off the phone these days? Chris tries to unlock it, but suddenly there's like a 6-digit passcode, and that wasn't there before, and he doesn't know what it is. Nicole, though, she does know what it is. So she unlocks the phone, and immediately a flood of missed calls and texts kind of stop popping up. It's kind of messages from Nicole and other friends because, of course, Nicole had been calling other people trying to figure out what was going on. And in return, of course, they were texting and calling her as well. They see a text from Chris sent at 7:40 a.m. that morning, and it says, if you take the kids somewhere, please let me know where they're at. Chris then tells police that they've had a difficult conversation that morning. They discuss a separation. It was very emotional. And so to the police, this looks like she just needed some space. Maybe she left to stay with a friend. But with all of her stuff still in the house, they're just not sure what's going on.
It does not make sense. Anyone that's going to go stay with a friend, they're going to take their phone, their wallet,
their car.
Yeah. So how, unless she's getting picked up, but even still, there'd be obvious signs that she's packed.
Exactly.
Like stuff to leave. So I don't know if I buy Chris at this point.
Interesting. Very interesting. So, well, basically the police start going around the neighborhood asking if anyone has seen or heard anything. They're hoping that some of the neighbors might have some security cameras or something that could help. And that's a smart move because this is a really densely packed suburban area, right? All the houses are new constructions. They're like 4,000 square feet each. So they're absolutely massive, but they're also really crammed, really close together. So even though you've got this massive space inside your house, your neighbor is like barely 10 yards from your property line. The neighbor immediately to the left of the Watts' house has already noticed the commotion from earlier, and he's already started scrubbing through his Ring doorbell footage, and he tells police to come and have a look. Now, the Watts also had a doorbell camera, but because you can like sort of adjust the detection range, theirs only triggers when someone is like 10 feet from the door. So the only footage it captures was Shanann walking up to the front door the night before. There is no footage of anyone leaving through it because they usually left through the garage door.
And that's not covered by any of the CCTV or doorbell.
Exactly. But the neighbor's doorbell had a much wider angle and it was capturing part of the entrance to the Watts' garage. So if anyone did leave through the garage, it would have definitely been recorded.
So they're going to go knock on that neighbor's door, right?
Well, he's already scrubbed through it, right? So he has something.
Oh, okay.
The police and Chris, they go over to check the footage. They see at 5:17 a.m. that morning, Chris backs his truck into the garage. He loads something into it and then drives off. And of course, the police are like, what exactly were you loading? And Chris explains that it was his tools, basically, and that he never leaves his tools in the truck overnight just in case they get stolen. So he says that it's easy for him to back his truck up, load everything in at once instead of wasting energy and time walking up and down the driveway. So police are like, yep, that's fine. That makes sense.
Makes sense, but still suspicious.
Still suspicious. They haven't seen the rest of the footage yet. So the rest of the footage from that morning shows no other movement in or out of the Watts' house through their garage door until Nicole shows up around about noon. So if Shanann did leave on her own, the only other possibility is that she went out through the back entrance. And so to them, that must be the explanation. Mm-hmm. So as a potential clue, this ends up going nowhere. Nicole and Chris, they keep calling as many friends as they can. They're trying to piece things together. They're brainstorming, reaching out to kind of different people, just doing whatever they can think of. Because right now, Shanann and the girls, they're missing. So Adam, what do you think's going on?
Well, obviously Nicole was right to be suspicious now. Mm-hmm. But I don't know. I don't know how she could just up and disappear without being caught or on some kind of CCTV. If she's leaving out the back of the house, would she not have to somehow walk around the garden to the front to leave the house? Or is there like a back gate exit or something?
Sure. The only thing I think of is that if she did leave out the back entrance and she came around the side where her front door was, that wouldn't have captured her because, of course, it's only got a 10-meter range. This is, I guess, why they might be looking at other neighbours up and down the street to see if maybe they'd seen her walking past or if anyone's recorded her getting into someone else's car because they picked her up, etc. So right now, they just don't have that information. So let me tell you a bit about Shanann. Shanann was born in New Jersey in 1984, but she spends most of her childhood in North Carolina with her mom, her dad, and little brother Frankie. They're all super, super close. A lot of people think this next detail is really sweet, but because of the relationship I have with my sister, I think it's fucking creepy. In fact, it made me actually vomit in my mouth a little bit. Apparently, Frankie says that Shanann took him to her senior prom.
Well, what's wrong with that? That's a sweet thing to do. But I know if you look at it, is it incest? Surely.
I'm not thinking of incest at all. That's not where my mind was. I just think about my sister and I think about me being her date to a prom. I'm like, no, thank you.
But maybe I think it's supposed to be sweet and genuine, I think, yeah.
Well, he describes her as like incredibly determined. He once said that she had success in her eyes and nothing was going to stand in her way of her following her dreams. She's the hardest working person I've ever known, which, okay, I guess that is a really sweet thing to say about your sister. If you don't come from the Risi household, then yeah, you'll have a different opinion of your own sister. Like, do you remember the Barney the Dinosaur song growing up? It went something like, I love you, you love me, we're a happy family. Do you remember that song?
Yes, I just wanted you to see if you would sing the whole lot.
I thought you would take over, you know?
Nope.
Well, me and my sister, we had our own version. Do you want to hear it?
Go on then.
I hate you.
Of course.
You hate me. We're one unhappy family with a great big punch and a kick from me to you. Won't you say you hate me too?
I'm pretty sure Bart and Lisa Simpson sang that to each other.
Oh, maybe that's where we got it from.
Yeah, it feels like that's from The Simpsons.
I mean, it could have been. I don't know.
But I see.
I had a lot of great influences in my life, Adam.
You and your sister didn't get along.
We get it, Kyle. My point is, I really struggle when siblings talk about each other really fondly, let alone going to your senior prom with your sister. I don't know, maybe that's just me.
Your sister might be listening to this. Do you want to say a little something?
I hope she is listening to this. I really do. I still hate you after all these years.
Harsh.
Overall, though, like, they're a really tight-knit family. They don't really come from a lot of money, but maybe that's kind of part of what makes Shanann so determined to build her own success in her life. And the thing is, though, by the age of 25, she saves enough money to build her own house, which, I mean, that is truly incredible. So she meets a guy called Leonard King, and at 18, they get married. People say that her determined nature, being the total opposite of Leonard, is part of why things don't really work out in their marriage. Eventually, they divorce in 2009, and he later tells police that Shanann just poured herself into her work and basically just shut him out after, like, obviously trying some therapy and things like that. That didn't work, so in the end, the only option for them was divorce. Eventually, though, and presumably to help her move on, one of Shanann's friends connects her with a guy she thinks that she will like on Facebook, and his name is Chris Watts. But it's still pretty soon after her divorce, so she doesn't really act on the friend request at all. It was also that weird time in Facebook history where kind of you could poke people. Do you remember that? That was like an actual feature.
Yeah, what was the point of that?
I have no idea. You get like a notification that says, Shanann has poked you, poke her back. And then for some reason, that was just a thing.
I wonder if it was like mimicking what MSN Messenger used to do at the time. Do you remember when you were on that?
With the nudges.
And the nudge, and it will shake your whole screen. You're like, I'm ignoring you for a reason. Stop nudging me.
Possibly. Who knows? Who knows? But basically, there's probably a lot of poking going on between them. Eventually, Shanann does accept his friend request, but there's still like a lot of reluctance on her part because she's just been diagnosed with lupus. Do you know what lupus is?
No.
Basically, it's an autoimmune disease that causes like a lot of inflammation in the joints. You're always really tired. You're always in a lot of pain. But even though this is going on, Chris kind of sticks with her. And in the end, she ends up loving him even more just for staying with her throughout her worst. And it's actually this unconditional love that actually fits Chris's personality to a T. Chris is like a year younger than Shanann. He is also from North Carolina, and he's a super chill kid growing up. He has an older sister who's about 7 years older than him, who keeps him in line. He's really great at school, but he's also really shy and really passive, which means that he doesn't really date a lot in high school. He's incredibly good looking now, but back then and into his early kind of adulthood, he's carrying a little bit of extra weight, but you can tell he's got good genes under that inch of insulation. He's got good jawbone, he's got good muscles, he tans really well. He's a Chad. He's a Chad, Adam.
All right, but potential suspect. So let's not be too nice.
Yeah, that's true, actually. Reel it in, Kyle. Chris is super into NASCAR mechanics and anything car related. So after graduating, he earns a scholarship to a technical school with the dreams of working for NASCAR. And at college, he's super dedicated. And while all his mates are like off partying, he just kind of stays behind. He's not really comfortable in big crowds or anything like that. Like I said, he's really passive. Eventually, he does graduate, but he doesn't actually have the grades that he needs to land a job with NASCAR. So that kind of dream doesn't pan out for him. Still, he does really well for himself. He moves out, he saves a bunch of money, and overall, he's just a really responsible guy. When he meets Shanann, she's really the first person he's seriously dated, and after about a year after meeting, he proposes, and it's actually a really, really sweet moment. He brings both of the families together on the beach, he proposes right there in front of everyone, and eventually they get married in November 2012. So after this, Chris and Shanann, they moved to Frederick, Colorado in 2013, which is where they are now. They already had some friends out there. Frederick is just east of Boulder, which, a little side note, is actually where John Bonet lived.
Oh, really?
And Adam, it is just gorgeous. They've got these stunning views of the Rocky Mountains. It's really outdoorsy kind of place. Tons of people are out walking, hiking, riding bikes all the time. It's basically like the Bondi Beach of inland America. Mm-hmm. They start building this huge house in the suburbs, like it's 4,000 square feet. It's just huge. Chris gets a job as an operator for an oil and gas company, and Shanann works from home for a children's hospital call center. Once they're settled, they start thinking about having a family, but because Shanann has lupus, they know that this is actually going to be really, really difficult for them because there's like a higher risk of miscarriage and other pregnancy kind of complications. So they had to kind of accept the possibility that they might never actually have any biological kids of their own. But then on December the 17th, 2013, they welcome Bella Watts into the family. And not long after that, on July the 17th, 2015, she is joined by her little sister, Celeste, who they call Cece for short. Isn't that cute? It's shortly after Cece is born that Shanann begins working for this multi-level marketing company called Lavelle, who sells like a variety of health supplements and weight loss patches under the brand name Thrive. Have you heard of them before?
No, I don't think I have.
I mean, this is subjective, but it's pretty much a pyramid scheme. It's different in that, unlike other MLM schemes, you don't have to buy like a ton of inventory up front. So you don't have to be out of pocket from the very start. So the company actually really invests in showing you how to succeed, which I guess is a responsible kind of pyramid scheme in a way. And the main emphasis on their training is guiding you through building a network on Facebook to sell and recruit, which increases kind of your potential earnings down the line. And she figures this all out really, really quickly. And she's super active on Facebook. And honestly, Adam, she is awesome at it. She's got this whole kind of spiel going on, which basically uses Facebook like LinkedIn, but in a way that feels more personal, relatable, and intimate. Most of her posts are about her family, her beautiful surroundings, and her success, all while featuring these Thrive products, both to sell and attract new recruits to become kind of brand promoters. And she also uses kind of Chris as social proof, like he starts using the Thrive weight loss patches. So he loses a ton of weight, like that 1 inch of body fat just emerges into this absolute Chad. Like, and he's always doing push-ups and he's doing like kind of bench press kind of challenges. He looks great.
Yeah, but an inch of body fat? I feel that's not a lot to kind of...
I'm maybe exaggerating. Basically, he's chiseled down.
Okay, fine. Interesting, and you might go there, but why is her career important to her disappearance?
I think it's because of how online she is and the fact that there's so much footage available online once she goes missing is kind of like a lot for internet sleuths to mull over. There's just a lot of clues. The theme of this is that there's just so much surveillance around them. There are all the videos that she's posted online. There is all the body cam footage from the police officers. There is the police interviews. There's the media getting involved. There's the posters. There's the text messages that they have as well. That's all just so very public.
And is this one of the reasons then that the police were able to solve this within 72 hours because there was just so much evidence online and everywhere else that they could draw on?
I would definitely say that it definitely played a part. Now, I'm not telling you about her job because there's a clue there. I'm telling you about her job so that you can relate and empathize with the fact that this woman's gone missing. I'm trying to build a human connection here, Adam.
I wondered if there was something with, this was going to lead to a clue. That was kind of why I was wondering.
Are you just saying I just wasted all of this time?
No, that's not it at all. I was just curious if there was a not a point to this, but sorry, carry on.
Thank you. Basically, through her job, she gets to go on all sorts of work trips, right? Training seminars, conventions, like the whole deal. And that's exactly where she was the weekend before she disappeared. So there you go. There's the segue into why that was important. But now she's missing, and the girls are missing too. And that morning, Chris has asked her for a divorce. So where the fuck is she? So after Nicole alerts the police, they go into full investigation mode. They start gathering any information that might be important. Shanann and the girls' heights, their weights, any scars, marks, or tattoos. Officers then start going door to door, handing out flyers, speaking to any neighbours. They even set up stop points in the street, talking to any drivers passing through. Like the whole community is just deeply concerned that this young mother is missing, and so is her two kids.
Yeah, and in really weird circumstances, because it doesn't seem like she's left by her own accord.
No, her stuff is in the house. That is the point, right?
And of course, two young children, people are going to be very concerned about their disappearance.
Exactly. By the next day, the news has reached the attention of the media. Reporters start showing up at the house. Meanwhile, the police bring canine sniffer dogs in to see if they can pick up a scent of Shanann and the girls inside. Chris, of course, he is super concerned, but he's also really cooperative. And at this point, he actually gives an interview on his front porch, basically pleading for the girls' return. He talks about how he can't eat or sleep until they come back safe. And the reporters ask him, did you guys get into an argument before she disappeared? And Chris is like, I wouldn't call it an argument, but we did have an emotional conversation. I'll just leave it at that. Listen, I just want them back. And it comes across as genuine. Mm-hmm. He's a very passive, reserved guy. So the fact that he's speaking this much is really out of character for him anyway. But of course, considering the circumstances, he understands this is exactly what he needs to do, right?
Well, yeah, absolutely.
But for police, there's just nothing else to go on. The only thing that they have, which doesn't quite add up, is that the doorbell footage shows Shanann went into the house, but she did not leave through the garage or the front door. All they see is Chris leaving for work that morning, but that is literally it.
Considering all they have is Chris going in and out of the house, there's got to be more to it than that.
For sure.
And you mentioned about his walk around the house, which was like a minute or something like that.
Yeah, minute 17 seconds to go from the garage to the front door.
Was he doing something? I don't know. There's just more to him. I've got a question mark over him. I don't trust him, regardless of how passive or nice or chilled he is.
Sure. Well, the reality is, Adam, like, you're quite a perceptive kind of guy. And if you're picking up on this early on, then so are the police. So, of course, they have nothing else to go on. They've got to go where the most obvious lead will take them, right? And right now, the only person who is proven to last seen Shanann and the girls is Chris.
Yeah, until they say, like, there's a statistic that it's usually the men in a relationship that's going to be bumping off a woman.
What about the statistic for lesbian relationships?
I don't know.
It's normally the woman then, I guess.
I
It's
guess
the only
so.
option.
But I think in terms of domestic violence and things like that, it's 9 times out of 10, it's always the man that's responsible.
Or someone that you know, basically. So, Adam, this is a great time for us to take a quick break. And when we get back, it's going to be less than 24 hours before this. Hey, freaks. If you've been enjoying the show, we've got a small favor to ask.
Yeah, we need your help, and it's super simple, but it makes a massive difference. Last time we asked you guys to leave reviews, the response was overwhelming.
You all really showed up for us, and we loved reading every single one of your reviews. But we've got to keep that momentum going. So, if you're a seasoned Compendium podcast listener, or even if you're new here and you love what you're hearing, could you please take a quick second to leave us a review?
It's super easy. If you're on Spotify, all you got to do is click that star button and give us a 5-star review. Nice and quick, done in like 2 seconds.
But if you're feeling extra generous and you've got a bit more time in your hands, then head over to Apple Podcasts and leave us a sweet, thoughtful written review. Trust us, this will go a long way.
Or if you're like, I don't use podcast apps, no worries. You can still show us some love by going to our website, thecompendiumpodcast.com, and leave us a review there. We've made it super easy.
The more reviews we get, the more listeners we can reach, and the better episodes we can bring you. It's a win-win, really.
So yeah, hit that star, leave us a review, and help us grow this amazing community. We appreciate it more than you know.
So, should we get back to the show?
Let's do it.
Case is solved. Okay, Adam, we're back.
It's still Chris.
It's still Chris. Well, as you'd expect, they invite Chris in for some questioning, which is pretty standard, right? To rule out partners early on in an investigation like this, especially since he is the last known person to have seen them. In the interview, he tells them that in the early hours of the morning, he felt Shanann get into bed around 2 a.m. He was already asleep because, of course, he had to get up really early in the morning for work. At 4 a.m., he gets up, he gets ready for work, and then he gets back into bed and he has this conversation with Shanann about their marriage, which is perfect timing at 4:15 in the morning, right?
Yeah,
after getting 2 hours of sleep.
That makes no sense, but okay.
And this isn't really a surprise to Shanann because in the weeks and months leading up to this point, they'd been having some real difficult issues in their marriage. Chris says that he realized after Shanann and the girls went to spend 6 weeks visiting family in North Carolina over the summer, that's when he realized that he didn't actually want to be with her anymore.
That's a really long time as well to be away from your children.
It is quite a long time. And I mean, in America, they do summer for quite a long time as well. Chris doesn't go with them because, of course, he has to work, but he does fly out for the last week. And that's when it really sank in for Shanann that Chris was going to end things. So when they get back to Colorado, he kind of wanted to tell her face-to-face, but she had to leave for this trip to Arizona. So he decided to wait till the Monday so he could do it face-to-face. He says that after he told her that morning, there was a lot of emotions, but they agreed, and then he went to work. Shanann said that she was taking the girls to visit a friend, and at 7:40 a.m., while Chris is at work, he sent her a text saying, if you do take the kids somewhere, please let me know where they're at. A few hours later, he gets a call from Nicole telling him to come home, and that's all he knows. And he says to the police, like with all the police activity and the media coverage, he thought that she would have seen this by now and then come home. But when they ask him what he thinks happened, he says that maybe someone took her. And if they did, it would have to be someone who knew her because there was no signs of a break-in, which I think is a fair statement, right?
Yeah, that would make sense.
Then they say to him, it sounds like Nicole was more concerned than you were. And that is a big statement to make, right? Something that you would expect him to perhaps push back on. Like, no, I am worried. But instead he says, well, if Shanann doesn't get back to me, that's fine. We often kind of leave each other on unread. But Shanann would never do that to Nicole or any other friend, which is why Nicole was more concerned.
Okay.
They keep talking. The detectives ask him loads more questions about Shanann, her job, her friends, and obviously their relationship. And eventually, they hand Chris a picture of his family. Just like a normal picture, right? The detective wants to see his reaction. He takes a photo, and instead of showing any emotion, he just starts describing them, like listing their physical attributes. He's like, Celeste is blonde, she's got hazel eyes, etc. She's the youngest of the family. There's no emotional response, no cracking in his voice. There's no hesitation, right?
But why describing them? Because clearly the police can see.
Yeah, exactly. That's the thing.
Like.
The natural response would be, oh my God, my babies.
Yeah.
I want them back.
Or like a memory of them or something like that. It just seems quite clinical.
Yeah, that's it. He does share a couple memories about them, but it's exactly as you described. It's quite clinical. There's very little emotion in how he's describing them. And at this point, the police know something's up, right? A normal reaction of seeing a photo of your missing family would definitely trigger some kind of emotional response. Instead, he just rambles on for minutes about what they're like as people. And the detectives, they just sit and they listen. In a way, kind of like a teacher does when they know you're full of shit, right? They just sit back in their chair. They let the long silences happen, right? And in between their questions, they just stare at him. And he just kind of struggles to kind of like fill those silences. And he ends up just rambling quite a lot. Then the detectives ask him, when we find who took them, what should we do with them? And this is a behavior-provoking question. Like, it's designed to gauge his reaction. An innocent person would usually give like a draconian response, something like, they should get the harshest sentence possible.
Yeah.
But a guilty person will give an equivocating response, which means they will fragmentize and divert from the question to avoid responding to it directly. So Chris says, they're going to come home safe, right, when they find this guy. So instant deflection there. The detective is like, when we find this guy, they are coming home. When they do, what should we do to them? And Chris hesitates and goes, life in prison? The detective says, what if they've hurt them? And Chris says, the death penalty then? But I'm not even sure that's an option in Colorado. Is it? What he doesn't know is that at this point in history, it actually is.
Oh.
The detective then says, I want to keep talking about things that might make you feel uncomfortable. Like, you've been very open to me about the real difficult conversation that you had with Shanann the morning she disappeared. He's like, a lot of people would say, you don't need to know about any of that, just find my kids. But you've been really willing to answer these questions, and I really appreciate that. But now I need to ask you something about your marriage and infidelity. And Chris responds, I would never cheat on my wife. I would never do that. And then he rambles on for like minutes as to why that was the truth, like justifying like who he was as a person, how his friends kind of see him, how his family sees him. He's extremely loyal and things like that. And the detective, again, just sits back, listens. They have these long silences. And in the end, they just say, okay. He then asks Chris if he's willing to do a polygraph. And Chris is like, yes, of course. So he agrees to come in the next day at 11 o'clock. And when he arrives, the woman administering the polygraph is super sweet and she's super reassuring. She doesn't seem like she's part of the investigation team at all. She comes across as someone external, as if she's just kind of like hired to conduct the test.
Just doing her job sort of thing.
Just doing the job, which is by design. Like, she's dressed really casually. She's wearing like a black and white striped top too. And she puts him at ease. She thoroughly explains how polygraphs work. She's reassuring him like there's nothing to be nervous about. She tells him like she's done tons of these before, and that if he had nothing to do with Shannon's disappearance, then there was nothing for him to worry about, and that they will find out the truth today. And she repeats this line like 3 or 4 times, like in a really calming, reassuring tone throughout like their 30-minute conversation.
And is that a tactic? Because if he has something to do with it, that's going to make him feel slightly on edge or anxious?
You're on the money. It's 100% intentional. If he's innocent, it acts as a psychological reassurance. Mm-hmm. But if he's guilty, it adds psychological pressure, something that can amplify the reading in the machines.
I imagine it kind of like brings any kind of tension or anxiety to the surface. So he's probably doing his best, if he is guilty, to go, don't think of this, whatever, trying to keep himself calm to try and, I don't know, fool the test.
Yeah.
But by that kind of reassurance, that's probably going to make you feel on edge.
Yeah, exactly. And like, when she says this, it is in a really reassuring kind of jokey tone. She says, if you have something to do with this disappearance, and she sort of laughs at this moment, and then she says, it would be really dumb for you to come into the session today. Mm. And he's like, and he agrees, and he's like, yep, yeah, of course, I'm here because I'm innocent, etc. Then she says, before we start, we first need to establish an emotional baseline for your responses. Basically, she's going to ask him a bunch of questions where they both 100% know the answer to. And he's supposed to like deliberately lie when he responds. And I think they have him like write down a number. And then she asks, did you write down this number or that number? And he has to lie. But she already knows the number that is written down, right? Mm-hmm. They go through the exercise and then she says, wow, I have to say, you're actually a really bad liar. And again, saying this is really intentional, right? She explains, when you answer these control questions, the ones that you lied on really registered really high up on the chart as a lie. So you actually did a really great job. This tells me that you actually know that it's wrong to lie. So thank you for being a terrible liar. It's so clever. I loved watching this interrogation video.
Do they do this to every person they...
Yeah, they employ all these tactics, and that's what makes this case so fascinating, because they have all this interrogation videos, and there's like 6 hours of it. You could just get lost in it. They explain all these different kind of techniques that they use in order to kind of like reassure them or make them feel in a certain way. A good example is when they're interrogating or interviewing him. They walk in, Chris is sitting near the door, the detective comes around and sits against the wall. But before they start the questioning, he says, I just want to rearrange the room a little bit. The detective gets up. He asks Chris to sit in the corner of the room, and then the detective sits in front of him and the door. Mm-hmm. So basically, it creates like a barrier between the door, which kind of breaks down his confidence and sense of security, knowing that the only way out of this room
is through
the detective. Yeah. So they employ all these different things, even the way that he's sitting and the way that he asks questions, these long silences, they're all designed to do something very specific.
It's kind of fascinating, really.
Unbelievably fascinating. So this polygraph woman, she then says, great, you're a terrible liar and I thank you for that. Chris is like, great. And he's like kind of sweating from his temple, right? Mm. She then says, the coolest thing about this right now is that only one of us knows the truth. But in about 2 minutes, there's going to be 2 of us. And she's like, okay, you ready? And he's like, yep.
Wow, that's an interesting way of phrasing it.
Mm-hmm. She goes, do you understand that I will only ask you questions about what we've discussed? He goes, yes. Regarding Shanann's disappearance, do you intend to answer all the questions truthfully? Yes. Is your name Christopher? Yes. Before 2018, did you ever lose your temper with someone that you cared about? No. Did you physically cause Shanann's disappearance? No. Were you born in 1985? Yes. Before 2018, did you ever say anything out of anger to someone you loved? No. Are you lying about the last time you saw Shanann? No. Are you currently in the state of Colorado? Yes. Before 2018, did you ever want to hurt someone to get even with them? No. Do you know where Shanann is now? No. In that moment, her chirpy tone is gone. She says, "This portion of the test is now complete. Please take the instrument out of operation. I'll be right back."
God.
Fuck!
She's changed.
She is changed. That whole thing was completely orchestrated and very intentional. From her demeanor, the way she was dressed, the way she made him feel relaxed, the 30-minute conversation, everything she said was scripted to the letter. And it was just incredible. And I think when you are watching this footage, you don't realize that until this moment here where she goes, "The test is now complete."
And I wonder what kind of training you go through to do that. There must have been quite intense training to come across in this way. And what I also quite liked about it was the questions, because I'm guessing he is the one that's guilty here. They switch between ones which are definitely yes and no.
Yes.
So that just, I don't know, fool or trick his brain a little bit. Or
it's interesting. They do explain that. So basically what it does is those filler questions like, "Are you in the state of Colorado?" They are to kind of like, from the previous question, to almost reset you. It's like a palate cleanser, like a palate cleanser course between kind of main courses.
Yeah.
So it kind of does that. And also, they also know the answers to those questions as well. So they're also always registering that baseline again.
Yeah.
Going, okay, how does this compare to the baseline? We know that his name is Chris.
Goes back to baseline. Next question. Oh, it spikes up. He's lying.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Fascinating stuff. So she comes back in with a detective. Point blank, they say to him, "It is completely clear that you've not been honest during this test. You did not pass a polygraph, and now we need to talk about what actually happened, and I feel like you're probably ready to do that." Of course, Chris is like, "I promise I'm not lying." He's clearly freaking out now, right? The detective just looks at him and says, "Chris, stop. Just stop. Just take a deep breath for me." Here's the thing. The polygraph test only confirmed what the police already knew, because while they were questioning Chris, putting him through this polygraph, they'd already taken a trip out to the oil field where he was working that day just to cover all their bases. The area that he was working in that morning was just completely barren. It's a flat, empty field in the middle of nowhere. All that's there are these just two giant oil silos. And that is where they spotted the fitted sheet missing from their bed. When they investigate further, they discover Shannon's body buried in a shallow grave. But the kids are not there. So back in the interrogation room, they tell Chris that the jig is up and that he needs to start talking. But he's just denying. Finally, he's really emotional. He just says, "Can I just talk to my dad, please?" And the police are just not getting anywhere. So in the end, they just agree. His dad comes into the room. Of course, this has all been recorded. Chris is really upset. And through his tears, he whispers that Shanann had smothered the kids that morning and that he had killed her in a fit of rage. And his dad is like, "No, what are you talking about?" His dad has no idea how to process what he's just heard. And then eventually the police come back in. They watch the entire recording and they discuss what Chris has just said. And they look him in the eye and they say, "Are you comfortable with the public knowing what Shanann did to your girls?" And he says, "Yes, because that's what happened and they need to know the truth."
I don't buy that. I don't think.
But Chris wasn't the only one who gave a statement to police that day. While he was being interviewed, a work colleague of his contacted them. Her name was Nikki Kissinger, and she explained that she met Chris at work in June, so 8 weeks prior, and that they had been in a romantic relationship ever since.
Really?
Yep. Remember when Shanann and the kids went to North Carolina over the summer for that 6-week period? Well, Chris didn't go. By that point, he had already lost a ton of weight using Shanann's weight loss patches. He was working out more. He had never really gotten any female attention growing up. Shanann was like his first ever girlfriend, and then they obviously got married. He's now a good-looking guy. He starts feeling good about himself, and Nikki was very interested in him, so she decided to pursue him.
I did think that was weird that he would go almost a whole summer not seeing his kids. That just doesn't
It's
sit
very
right with
strange.
me.
I mean, if you have to work, you have to work.
Yeah, but to go for 5 weeks, you would have broken it up. You would have done something different.
Exactly. And so when Shanann went to North Carolina with the kids, this relationship between him and Nikki just blossomed. Nikki said that she had no idea that he was married because he wasn't wearing a wedding ring. She knew he had kids, but he told her that they were in the process of a separation. She had also been to their house a few times, and of course, the family wasn't there, so she just trusted that he was telling the truth. But when she started seeing in the news and hearing what was going on from her other colleagues, she was like, what the fuck? So I guess during those 5 weeks, he wasn't feeling it with Shanann. And on top of their marital issues, they were already dealing with a lot of financial problems as well. They were already $70,000 in debt, not counting their mortgage, which was like $3,000 a month. Shanann's Lexus was costing them like $600 a month, and the kids' new school was $25,000 a year. They just didn't have enough money coming in. And at the time, their HOA was suing them for back dues. They even filed for bankruptcy in 2015. So they were just spending way more than they were making. And so before Nikki came along, Chris and Shanann were probably feeling that pressure. But then when Nikki entered the picture, it was like bingo, instant new family, right? They start making plans for the future, talking about formalizing his separation by filing for divorce. They even discuss having kids together. He says, I've always wanted a boy. I only have 2 girls. And Nikki's like, I'll give you your first boy.
Well, 1, you can't guarantee that. And 2, that's just a bit weird. And also really insensitive to having 2 daughters. Yes, you can wish to have a son, I'm sure. But I don't know, he seems very quick to move on.
Let me tell you why that's crap. Because here's a real kicker. On May the 28th that year, Shanann surprises Chris with the news that she's actually pregnant. And at that point, he is super excited. Remember, he hadn't met Nikki at this point, right? He won't meet her till the month later. But also, that baby was going to be a boy. And they were planning on naming him Nico. So that means that when Chris murdered Shanann, she was already 4 months pregnant.
Really? So he was willing to...
Not willing, he did.
What a dick.
So when Chris tells Nikki that he's always wanted a boy, what he was really saying was that he didn't want a boy or any baby with Shanann. And of course, he doesn't tell Nikki that Shanann is pregnant because A, that would prove that they weren't actually separated. And B, there's a good chance that Nick could probably run for the hills, right? So he spends the next 5 weeks with Nikki. He flies out to North Carolina in their final week. And the night he arrives, Shanann has like an awful headache. So he gives her 80 milligrams of oxycodone and makes her believe that it's Tylenol. He knows that oxycodone can cause a miscarriage. So he's hoping that will happen. Shanann spends the rest of the night throwing up and Chris does nothing to help her. Luckily, the baby is fine. And I don't know if this is fortunate or unfortunate, but Chris is still now stuck with a problem. So now he's determined to kind of work out what his next move is. And my point there is that if the baby did miscarry, would he then go off and just file for divorce? But Shanann is still pregnant. Will Nikki want to stay with him? Because he's got a young baby and also proves that he's been lying over the last few months.
Yeah, okay. I guess his plan A has not worked and he's going to be resorted to do something more extreme.
Yeah, exactly. Of course, things don't get any better when he gets back to Colorado. Now, he's terrified that Shanann's pregnancy would get back to Nikki. So to cover this up, he ends up deleting his Facebook so she wouldn't find out. And at this point, he starts plotting how he's going to kill Shanann so he can have access to his new life.
What a bastard.
Like, bro, it's called divorce.
Yeah, I don't understand. So selfish.
Like I said, I guess a divorce would mess up his relationship with Nikki, right? Because Shanann would still be pregnant.
So what about that? You've got a family and do you not care about the mother of your children? Regardless, you might not be in love with her, but they need a mother.
Exactly. Yeah. So when they get back from Colorado, Shanann feels him pulling away even more. The biggest clue is that she plans on having a gender reveal party, but Chris is so upset that they have to actually cancel it in the end. And so the night before she leaves for Arizona, she writes him a letter telling him how much she loves him and how she wants to fix their marriage. Later, that letter would be found in the trash with some pages missing. So I guess that makes it clear that he'd already made his mind up.
To throw that in the trash, but I guess he's hiding evidence there.
I don't know if he's necessarily hiding evidence. The fact that the pages are missing, sure. But the fact that he's throwing it into the trash kind of says a lot about how he's feeling about her.
Yeah, but then what he's saying that she had tried to strangle the kids or did strangle the kids. I just don't see a mum ever doing that.
No, I don't.
Not.
I mean, it happens.
It happens,
but I don't see it in this case.
That letter proves that she was kind of in a loving pace, wanted a family and everything.
Yeah.
I don't think she would flip like that.
While she's away in Arizona, she grows even more suspicious that there might be another woman because on the Saturday, Chris hires a babysitter, something that he's never done before. That night, he takes Nikki to a bar. He pays for dinner using a credit card. Before, he'd always use gift cards from work in order to cover up their dates because he knows that won't appear on actual statements. Shanann checks the statements. She notices two things. First, he was supposed to be at home with the kids. And second, he'd spent way more than she would have expected if he was dining alone. So this leads to kind of like a heated exchange over text. And this is what Shanann was confiding in Nicole about during their trip. So Nicole knew how bad things had gotten.
So Nicole knew that Shanann had suspicions that he was cheating.
Yeah, 100%.
And that's why the police were asking if he'd ever, it's about his infidelity.
Yeah, for sure. That's one of the first things that she told the police when they arrived at the house, right? They'd been fighting over the weekend. And I guess maybe it didn't matter to him that he was getting sloppy because he knew that he was going to kill Shanann in a couple of days. So in the interrogation room, Chris confesses. He claims that morning, Shanann, unable to imagine a life without him, decided to kill their kids. He says that he walks in, he saw what she was doing, and then he killed her in a fit of rage. He then tells police that the world needed to know what she did.
That also doesn't quite make sense because throughout this, he's been quite cool, calm and collected and quite willing to be helpful to the police. But if he knew that his wife had just killed his children, he would be distraught.
Sure.
And he hasn't let on about that whatsoever.
100%. Yeah, 100%, Adam. Of course, this is all bullshit. And now I'm going to tell you what actually happened on the morning of August the 14th. But I have to warn you, this is going to be really difficult to hear. This is actually from Chris's eventual confession that's pieced together when a journalist started writing to him in prison. Chris basically says that he woke up at 4 a.m. He went into each of the girls' rooms and he smothered them to death. That's Bella and Cece, who were 4 and 3 years old at the time. He then goes back into the main bedroom and he strangled Shanann. While she was dead on the bed, Bella walked into the room. Chris doesn't know what to do. He thought that she was dead. So he puts her back in her room. He pulls the truck up into the garage. He wraps Shanann in their bedsheet and loads her into the back seat of the truck. He goes upstairs to get Bella and to get Cece's body. He discovers that Cece is also alive. So he loads them both in the back seat, meaning that they have to sit on or between or next to their dead mother.
Oh my God.
Bella says, "Daddy, I can't get into the car because my car seat is in Mummy's car." He says, "That's fine, just get in." He then drives them to the work site, which is an hour drive away. He says he doesn't know why he went there. He was just in autopilot. He says all he remembers is being very angry that the girls were alive because they weren't supposed to be. So there's no remorse. There's no guilt. There's nothing there. He's just angry that they're alive.
Has he just flipped? What's happened to him?
When they arrived, he says that he killed Cece first by placing her blanket over her face and he smothered her. He then turned to Bella, who asked, "What's happened to Cece?" Because, of course, she's just seen it all, right? He then began to do the same to her, but apparently she screamed. She was like, "Daddy, no." But according to the evidence, it's clear that she fought him back. In the end, he couldn't smother her, so he strangled her to death. He buries Shanann in the fitted sheet in a shallow grave he digs. After that, he puts the girls into separate oil tanker silos in the middle of this field. Adam, they're massive. They're like maybe 4 stories tall, so he had to climb up a ladder with each of them just to reach the top. And when he gets there, there's a hatch that's just 8.5 inches wide. He then forces each of his daughters' bodies into those tiny openings, one by one. Officers were then sent to the site to recover Bella and Cece. And Adam, it is a whole operation. Their bodies had sunk to the bottom of each one of these tanks. And because it's crude oil, it starts to kind of corrode your flesh really, really quickly. So they have to drain the entire silo before they can even see the little girls inside there.
I don't know what to say. It's horrible.
The coroner and the detectives, they find hair around the 8.5-inch hatch, which indicates that he had to force them through that opening, something that was corroborated by the bruising on their tiny bodies. They also find oil residue in their lungs, which means that both of them were still alive when they were dumped into those tanks, Adam. They were just 3 and 4 years old. It's just incredibly graphic and really intense that after all of this is done, the officers that were involved, they were sent off on leave because of the PTSD that they had suffered.
I'm not surprised. I mean, I thought he was a piece of shit, but this is something else.
What is so gross is that throughout all of this, Chris just manages to maintain this air of calm and clear-headedness, even when the police show up, when he's being interviewed by the press, when he's being interrogated, even when he's taking the polygraph test, right? He doesn't seem to show any concern at all. You must be some kind of monster to be able to maintain that degree of calmness knowing what you did.
I wonder if I don't know, has he always been like this? I'm trying to think, has he always been deep down, just not quite right, or something just flipped in him?
Completely the opposite, Adam. He's always been really calm, collected, really passive, really responsible, really caring, really gentle. It's just completely alien. It's not who he is as a person. Obviously, he's done this, so it's always been in him. But yeah, there's a question of did he snap?
Where did this come from?
After doing this, he calls a girls' school to tell them that they'll be unrolling. He contacts a realtor to put the house up for sale. And throughout all of this, he is constantly texting Nikki. In fact, on his way home from the oil field, his Spotify playlist history shows that he played Metallica, then searched for the lyrics on Google and sent those lyrics to Nikki via text. The song was Battery, which included the line, "Cannot kill the family." Sick fuck.
Why would he send that?
It's obviously a song that resonated with them both during their time together. I don't think it's got anything to do with the fact that it contained those lyrics or that he was sending a message saying that he'd done what he did. Nikki, I do not believe she had anything to do with this. But it's sick that he was listening to Metallica on the way home.
I mean, there's nothing about what he did that makes sense. But the thought, like, he went to unroll his kids as if, like, to save money. I can't with this guy.
I just don't know how we thought he was even going to get away with this. He must be the dumbest criminal we've ever covered. To think that he could even try and get away with this.
Tell me that he gets the death sentence or something, like he must get punishment.
He is arrested on August the 15th, and he never left the police station after failing that polygraph. In the state of Colorado, murder carries an automatic life sentence, and the DA initially, they did try to pursue the death penalty, but Shannon's family just pleaded against it. At his sentencing, Frankie read the following statement. "We beg the district attorney to spare your life because we believe no one has a right to take another life, even someone like you." Shannon's mother said, "I didn't want the death penalty because that's not my right. Your life is between you and your God." And he sits and he has to listen to all these witness statements at the end of this hearing. And yeah, there's very little emotional response that he gives. There is some, but there should have been a way more. He should have broken down, listening to the impact that he'd had on the lives that were left behind. It was heartbreaking. On November the 6th, 2018, Chris pleaded guilty to all 9 counts, which were first-degree murder for Shanann, Bella, and Cece, the unlawful termination of a pregnancy, which is baby Nico, and 3 counts of tampering with a deceased human body. By pleading guilty, of course, he avoids a trial, so his sentencing was set for November the 19th, 2018, when the judge handed down this sentence and said the following. "This is, perhaps, the most inhumane, vicious crime I have encountered in the thousands of cases I've handled. Anything less than the maximum sentence would diminish the gravity of this offence. Deputies, I respectfully ask you to take the defendant into custody so he may serve the rest of his life in the Department of Corrections." And there is no possibility of parole for him ever, Adam. He will never be a free man again.
Good. He doesn't deserve whatsoever.
Of course, in prison, there is serious safety concerns because honestly, who wouldn't want to mess this guy up, right? Like, a lot can be overlooked in prison, but killing or abusing kids is a surefire way of getting yourself shanked, right? So they move him to a prison in Wisconsin, and he is on lockdown for 23 hours a day. He only gets 1 hour out of his cell to shower and to exercise, and that is it. And that will be it for the rest of his life. Over the years since this happened, he began corresponding with a journalist and author named Sherilyn Cadell. He basically agreed to exchange letters with her, and eventually she ends up writing a book called Letters from Christopher, which reveals a lot more information about what he did, like how he tried to make Shanann miscarry on their first night in North Carolina, and also how he smothered the girls before he actually strangled Shanann, which is really strange to me. You would think like you would kill Shanann first. This is not a playbook about how to commit murder, but you would think that you would at least kill Shanann first because, God forbid, if she woke up and she saw you smothering the kids, his life is over. There's no accounting for a mother's rage in that instance. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
We also learned that he chose not to bury the girls with Shanann because he hated her so much that he chose to keep them separate. It is important to note that he will not make any money from this book as mandated by the judge during his sentencing. But he does say that every day he hears Bella saying, "Daddy, no," which I think is exactly what he deserves. He deserves to live with that every single day.
I don't know. It's odd that he'd want to like reveal that to a journalist. I don't know. He needs to be forgotten about.
I think he does, yeah. The thing is, though, Shanann, Bella, Cece, and Nico, they were all buried under Shanann's maiden name in North Carolina, which I think is appropriate. As for Nikki, of course, she doesn't stay with Chris. I don't think there was any time for their relationship to even take off, which makes me question, like, in Chris's mind, was all of this really worth it?
Just get a divorce. If you're that unhappy,
yeah,
just get a divorce.
There are rumors where people speculate that maybe she was more involved than she was actually letting on. But I honestly don't think that is the case, especially since she was the one who came forward, right? Mm-hmm. You could argue that she realized that he wasn't going to get away with it at some point down the line, so she turns on him. But honestly, I just think that's speculation. I mean, it's a 5-week relationship. You are still in that stage where you're trying to impress your partner, borderline making it seem like you've never farted in your whole life. Let alone bringing up the idea of killing your entire family. So I don't buy that at all. What I did find interesting, though, is that there is like a profile category for people like Chris Watts that are called Family Annihilators. And what's even more fascinating is that in these cases, they tend to follow a very distinct pattern. The perpetrators always are typically white men in their 30s. They often commit their crimes in August when the kids aren't in school. And more often than not, it happens on a Sunday. So granted, in this case, obviously it was the early hours of Monday morning, but still, it's almost never spontaneous. It's always premeditated. Morbidly, Chris Watts fits this profile perfectly.
That's weird that there's a pattern with this, that there's enough people out there that have committed this crime, that there is a pattern. Wow.
Yeah. And to be honest, if it wasn't for Nicole, who knows how far he would have gotten in covering this up. I don't think he expected to be caught so fast. He probably assumed that he could go back home that night, cover up his tracks a bit, plant some seeds, make it look like Shanann had just run off. Who knows? But thanks to Nicole and their friendship, that fucker was busted in less than 72 hours.
Yeah, good. The police did the right job, and Nicole was spot on to be off. I mean, she clearly knew Shanann way better than he did or anyone else did.
Yeah, for sure. Now, listen, I don't normally believe in signs from the universe, but when the neighbor invites police over to review the footage from the Ring doorbell, he accesses the footage through his TV by speaking to his remote, right? So it's just regular TV broadcasting, and then he will say, like, access doorbell footage or whatever. But for some reason, the feed keeps switching back to live TV, like showing commercials or whatever is broadcasting on the telly at the time. On 2 separate occasions, when that happens, you briefly cut to a 3D kind of rendering of a fetus in a heart-shaped womb. And another time, there's a skull floating in kind of dark water, which kind of sort of looks like oil. And you see all of this on the body cam footage. It's a small minor detail that you might miss, but those are 2 things that really kind of almost give a clue as to what's happened, right?
That's weird, isn't it?
So bizarre. And I watched that this morning and I was like, damn, it's true. Really bizarre. Definitely watch the documentary on Netflix called American Murder, The Family Next Door. Like I said, it's the most watched documentary in recent years. Also, read Letters from Christopher by Cheryl Cadle. There's a lot of extra detail kind of in those books that weren't in the original kind of storytelling.
I don't know if I'd want to, personally.
Yeah, no. I mean, if you are really interested in criminology and you want to understand the psychology behind it and why he did these types of things, I think there's nothing wrong with having a morbid kind of intrigue around these types of things. That's why true crime is so popular, right?
I guess from a studying perspective.
Exactly.
Yeah, I get it.
And that's exactly why I said, just bear in mind, he's not going to be getting any of the proceeds for this. Cheryl Cadle is a respected journalist, right? So it just helps with kind of in that sphere of things with us trying to understand why, as a human race, people would do these sorts of things.
I think, yeah, that's the point. Covering this story is looking at that side of things because it is such an awful, awful story.
Yeah.
I think 99% of people, they just can't understand this.
For sure. And Adam, that was the tragic story of the Watts family murders.
That was, I wasn't prepared for that.
No, I did say it was going to be difficult. Maybe I should have given you a warning, give you the option to opt out. And if you say yes, I just do the whole podcast episode with Keith.
Yeah, you'd just be talking to yourself.
Yeah, I mean, probably one of the most morbid episodes we've ever done. Maybe I will do something a little bit lighthearted next week. Maybe Tanya Harding. Yeah. She broke someone's kneecaps.
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay. That's fine. That's within the remit. So should we run the outro for this week?
Let's do it.
And that brings us to the end of another episode of The Compendium, an assembly of fascinating things.
Do us a favor and follow us on either Apple or Spotify.
If you want even more, then you can join our Certified Freaks tier to unlock our entire archive and delve into exclusive content and get sneak peeks of what's coming up next. We'd love you to be part of our growing community.
We drop new episodes every Tuesday.
And until then, remember, even the darkest suburban dreams can cast a chilling shadow. See you next time.
See ya.